Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the massive hidden shipyard that floated deep inside the asteroid belt of the Sol system. The place was bigger than any city on Earth, and it had been built in complete secret over the past 15 years. Nobody outside of a few thousand humans knew it existed. The Draconian Empire thought Earth was still weak and broken after their last attack. But they were very wrong. The Admiral stopped at a viewing window and looked out at the fleet that humanity had built in secret. 150 warships hung in the darkness of space like sleeping giants. Each ship was painted black to make them hard to see against the stars. The largest ship was the UTS Defiance, and it was 3 kilometers long. That made it bigger than most space stations. But size was not the only thing that made this fleet special. Captain Lisa Rodriguez walked up to Morrison and handed him a datapad with her final report. She was the chief engineer of the entire project, and she had worked every day for 10 years to make these ships perfect. Her hands were covered in small scars from working with dangerous alien technology they had captured from the Draconians years ago. "All ships are ready for combat, sir," she said in a tired voice. "The new quantum fold drives work better than we hoped. Our ships can move through space faster than anything the Draconians have. We tested the drives yesterday, and the UTS Vengeance folded space and appeared behind an asteroid in less than 2 seconds. Morrison nodded as he read through her report. The humans had not just built big ships with big guns. They had taken every piece of Draconian technology they could find and made it better. Human engineers were good at taking things apart and putting them back together in new ways. The Draconians were too proud to think anyone could improve on their designs. Dr. Alex Carter approached them from the research section of the shipyard. He was carrying a sample of the new armor that covered every human ship. The armor looked like normal metal, but it was actually alive. Tiny machines inside the metal could fix damage to the ships even during battle. A Draconian laser that burned a hole in the armor would watch that hole close up again in minutes. "The living armor passed all our tests," Carter said as he showed them the sample. "We shot it with every weapon the Draconians use, and it kept repairing itself. But that is not the best part. The armor learns from each attack. If a Draconian shoots the same spot twice with the same weapon, the armor will be ready for it the second time." Morrison smiled for the first time in weeks. The humans had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. Every person in the shipyard had given up their normal life to work on the fleet. They had families back on Earth who thought they were dead. The sacrifice was huge, but it was necessary. Commander Ben Hayes came over from the intelligence section with his own report. He was a thin man with sharp eyes who had spent the last 5 years sneaking around Draconian space. His job was to learn everything about the enemy, where their ships were, how many soldiers they had, and most important, how they thought. "We have complete maps of all major Draconian military bases," Hayes said quietly. "My teams have been watching them for years. We know which bases are strong and which ones are weak. We know where they keep their best ships and where they keep their supplies. Most important, we know they still think humans are primitive and weak." The commander opened his datapad and showed them pictures of Draconian fortresses. Each fortress looked impossible to attack. The aliens had built them to last forever, and they had never been defeated in battle. But Hayes pointed out the weak spots that human eyes had found. Small gaps in their shields, places where their sensors could not see, and timing patterns in their patrols. "The Draconians have been the strongest force in the galaxy for over 1,000 years, Hayes continued. "They have never lost a real war. That makes them confident, but it also makes them lazy. They do the same things over and over because those things always worked before. They will not expect us to fight differently than we did 15 years ago." Morrison walked to another window and looked at the work crews making final preparations on the ships. Human workers moved with purpose and speed. Every person knew that the survival of their species depended on doing their job perfectly. The Draconians had made it clear that humans were only allowed to exist because they were not important enough to completely destroy. That was about to change. Captain Rodriguez joined him at the window. "The crews are ready too, sir. Every pilot has trained for thousands of hours in simulators. Every gunner knows their weapons better than the engineers who built them. Every Marine has studied Draconian ship layouts until they could find the bridge with their eyes closed." The Admiral knew that training was what would make the difference. Draconian soldiers were naturally stronger and faster than humans. They had better eyesight and their ships had more powerful weapons. But humans had something the Draconians did not understand. They could adapt and improvise. When something went wrong, humans would find a new way to solve the problem. Dr. Carter showed them the final piece of human preparation. It was a small device that looked like a simple computer chip. "This is our secret weapon," he said with pride. "We built it from studying draconian computers. When we plug this into any draconian ship, it will copy all their data and send it to us. Navigation charts, military codes, personal messages, everything." Commander Hayes nodded. "My intelligence teams will plant these devices on draconian ships during the first attacks. Once we have their data, we will know more about their military than their own generals do." Morrison received a message on his communication device. It was from Earth Defense Council, and the news was exactly what they had been waiting for. Long-range sensors had detected a large draconian fleet moving toward human space. The aliens were planning another invasion. They thought it would be easy to defeat Earth because they believed humans were still recovering from the last war. The Admiral gathered his senior officers around him. The moment they had all been preparing for had finally arrived. "Send the message to all ship captains. We launch in 72 hours. The Draconians want to teach us another lesson about who rules the galaxy. It is time we taught them a lesson about what happens when you underestimate humanity." As the orders went out through the shipyard, every human began making final preparations for war. They had built the most powerful fleet in human history, and now it was time to use it. The Draconian Empire was about to learn that the small blue planet they had dismissed was ready to fight back. Commander Vextar stood in the control room of Calyx Prime and looked at the sensor readings with annoyance. The massive fortress had protected the border of Draconian space for 300 years, and nothing had ever threatened it. The strange readings on his screens were probably just broken equipment or maybe asteroids drifting too close to the station. Calyx Prime was built inside a huge asteroid, and its weapons could destroy entire fleets. The fortress had shields that could stop any known weapon and armor thick enough to survive a direct hit from a star destroyer. Over 50,000 Draconian soldiers lived and worked inside the fortress. They all believed it was the safest place in the galaxy. The sensor operator turned to Vextar with a worried look. "Sir, the readings are getting stronger. I am detecting some kind of space distortion about 10,000 kilometers from the fortress. It looks like something is folding space, but that should be impossible." Vextar laughed and shook his head. "The humans do not have that kind of technology. Their ships are slow and primitive. They barely learned how to travel between stars 50 years ago. Check the sensors again and stop wasting my time with ghost readings." At that exact moment, the UTS Vengeance appeared out of folded space directly above the fortress. Captain Sam Turner stood on the bridge of his heavy cruiser and smiled as he looked down at the Draconian fortress. The enemy had no idea what was about to happen to them. "All weapons target their shield generators," Turner ordered his crew. "Fire everything we have at the same spot. Lieutenant Grace Miller, take your fighters and hit their communication array. We want them blind and cut off from the rest of their empire." The human attack began without any warning. Massive energy beams shot down from the UTS Vengeance and struck the fortress shields. But these were not the weak human weapons the Draconians remembered from 15 years ago. The beams cut through the shields like they were made of paper and began burning into the fortress armor. Inside Calyx Prime, alarms started screaming and emergency lights flashed red. Vextar stared at his screens in shock as he watched human ships appear all around his fortress. The humans had somehow learned to fold space, and they were using that ability to appear inside his defense perimeter. "All batteries return fire," Vextar shouted to his weapons officers. "Launch all fighters and send a distress signal to Fleet Command." "How many human ships are attacking us?" The weapons officer checked his readings and his face turned pale. "Sir, I count 20 human ships, but more keep appearing. Their weapons are much more powerful than our records indicate. They are cutting through our armor like it is not even there." Lieutenant Grace Miller led her fighter squadron through the space around Calyx Prime like she had trained for this exact mission her entire life. Her small fighter was faster and more maneuverable than anything the Draconians had ever built. She could make turns that would crush a Draconian pilot, and she could think 3 moves ahead in any dogfight. The Draconian fighters that came out to meet her were bigger and had more powerful weapons, but they flew like they expected to win just because they were Draconians. Miller and her pilots had studied every weakness of Draconian fighters, and they knew exactly how to exploit them. "Blue Squadron, hit their engines," Miller called over the radio. "Red Squadron, target their weapons." These pilots have never fought anyone who could match their speed. "Let's show them what human training can do." The human fighters swarmed around the slower Draconian ships like angry bees. Every time a Draconian pilot tried to line up a shot, a human fighter would appear behind him and destroy his ship. The Draconians had superior technology, but the humans had superior tactics and training. Admiral Morrison watched the battle from the bridge of the UTS Defiance. His massive flagship had not even entered the fight yet, but he could see that the smaller human ships were winning easily. The plan was working exactly as they had hoped it would. "Captain Rodriguez, are you getting good data from their computers?" Morrison asked over the communication system. Rodriguez was leading a team of engineers who were hacking into the Draconian systems while the battle raged around them. "Yes, sir," Rodriguez replied from her position near the fortress. "We are copying everything. Navigation charts, fleet positions, supply schedules, and military codes. The Draconians never expected anyone to be able to break into their systems, so their security is terrible." The battle for Calyx Prime lasted 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The human fleet moved like a single living creature, with each ship knowing exactly what the others were doing. When Captain Turner needed cover, Commander Phillips was there with her destroyer. When Lieutenant Miller ran low on ammunition, Captain Davis was ready with resupply drones. The Draconians fought bravely, but they were not prepared for this kind of coordinated attack. They had always won battles by having bigger ships and more powerful weapons. They had never faced an enemy that could outthink them and outmaneuver them at the same time. Commander Vextar made his final report to Draconian High Command just before his communication array was destroyed. "The humans have ships that can fold space and appear anywhere they want. Their weapons are far more advanced than we believed. Calyx Prime is lost. The human fleet is like nothing we have ever seen before." When the fortress shields finally collapsed, human Marines led by Colonel Frank Davis boarded Calyx Prime through the damaged sections. The Draconian soldiers they met inside were shocked and demoralized. They had been told that humans were weak and primitive, but the humans they faced were professional soldiers with advanced weapons and perfect teamwork. "Secure the computer core and the armory," Davis ordered his Marines. "We need every piece of data and every weapon we can carry. This fortress has been collecting intelligence on human space for decades. Now we get to see what they know about us." As the sun set on the battle, Calyx Prime was burning wreckage floating in space. The fortress that had never been defeated in 3 centuries had fallen to a human fleet in less than a day. More important than the military victory was the intelligence victory. Captain Rodriguez had successfully copied the entire Draconian military database. Admiral Morrison sent a simple message to the Draconian High Command through the captured communication system. "You taught us that might makes right 15 years ago. We learned that lesson very well. Now we will teach you what happens when you underestimate humanity." The message reached Emperor Korthnax on his throne world, just as reports began arriving from other border fortresses. The human fleet was not just attacking Calyx Prime. They were hitting targets all along the Draconian frontier, and they were winning everywhere they appeared. The war that would shake the galaxy had begun, and the Draconians were already losing. Emperor Korthnax sat on his golden throne and read the reports that came from every corner of his empire. Each message brought news that seemed impossible to believe. Human ships were appearing everywhere and destroying everything they touched. The species that he had dismissed as primitive, insects, was somehow winning battles against his best forces. The Emperor's claws scraped against the metal armrest of his throne as he tried to understand what had happened. 15 years ago, the humans had barely been able to defend their home planet. Their ships were slow and their weapons were weak. How had they developed technology that could challenge the greatest empire in the galaxy in such a short time? Fleet Admiral Zargoth entered the throne room with his head held high. He was the most successful military commander in Draconian history, and he had never lost a major battle. The Emperor had summoned him to solve the human problem once and for all. "Your Majesty," Zargoth said as he knelt before the throne, "I have assembled a fleet of 800 ships to hunt down and destroy these human raiders. It is the largest force our empire has fielded in 2 centuries. The humans will be crushed by overwhelming firepower." Emperor Korthnax nodded slowly. "See that they are. These humans have embarrassed our empire for too long. I want their fleet destroyed and their homeworld burned to ash. Show the galaxy what happens to those who dare challenge Draconian might." But the human fleet was not fighting the kind of war that Zargoth expected. Admiral Morrison had divided his ships into small groups that could strike anywhere in the galaxy, and disappear before help could arrive. The humans were not trying to hold territory or fight pitched battles. They were hunting the Draconians like predators. Captain Danny Walsh commanded the UTS Shadow, one of 12 ships equipped with experimental cloaking technology. His destroyer could become invisible to all sensors and slip past enemy patrols without being detected. His mission was to find Draconian supply convoys and destroy them before they could reach their destinations. The UTS Shadow dropped out of fold space near a Draconian mining colony on the edge of their territory. Walsh and his crew watched through their sensors as huge cargo ships loaded precious metals that would be used to build more warships. The colony had only light defenses because it was deep inside Draconian space. "Target the cargo ships first," Walsh ordered his weapons officer. "Then hit the mining equipment and the communication array. We want to hurt their ability to supply their fleet, and we want them to know we can strike anywhere." The Shadow decloaked directly above the largest cargo ship and opened fire with everything it had. The Draconian ship exploded in a ball of flame that could be seen from the planet's surface. Before the colony defenders could react, the human ship had destroyed 3 more cargo vessels and vanished back into cloak. Commander Rachel Stone led a different kind of mission deep in Draconian space. Her squadron of fast attack ships specialized in hitting research stations and military installations. The humans had learned that knowledge was just as important as firepower in winning a war. Stone's ships appeared at a secret Draconian weapons laboratory that was developing new plasma cannons. The laboratory was hidden on a moon that did not appear on any public star charts. But human intelligence had found it anyway, and now it was time to make sure the Draconians could not complete their research. "Marines, prepare for boarding action," Stone commanded as her ship surrounded the research station. "We need to capture their data files before we destroy this place. Every bit of technology we steal is one less advantage they have over us." The psychological effect of these attacks was devastating to Draconian morale. For over 1,000 years, their empire had been the predator that hunted other species. Now they were the prey, and they did not know how to handle that feeling. Draconian commanders started seeing human ships in every sensor shadow and jumping at every false alarm. Admiral Zargoth tried to use his massive fleet to corner the humans and force them into a decisive battle, but the human ships were too fast and too smart to be trapped easily. Every time he thought he had them cornered, they would fold space and appear somewhere completely different. Morrison played a careful game with the Draconian admiral. He would let Zargoth's scouts find part of the human fleet and then lead them into an ambush. Small groups of Draconian ships would be lured away from the main fleet and destroyed by superior human tactics and firepower. Captain Lisa Rodriguez took her heavy cruiser, UTS Retribution, to attack a Draconian fuel depot that supplied their border patrol fleets. The depot was defended by 2 destroyers and a battle cruiser, but Rodriguez had brought friends. 3 other human ships appeared the moment she engaged the defenders. The Draconian captains fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The human ships worked together like they could read each other's minds. When one ship needed cover, another was already in position to provide it. When the Draconians tried to concentrate their fire on one target, that ship would disappear into fold space and appear behind them. "This is impossible," the Draconian battlecruiser captain transmitted before his ship was destroyed. "These humans fight like they share the same brain. How do they coordinate so perfectly?" The answer was training and trust. Every human captain had trained with every other captain for years. They knew each other's tactics and tendencies so well that they could predict what their allies would do in any situation. The Draconians had superior individual ships, but the humans had superior teamwork. News of each human victory spread through the galaxy faster than official Draconian reports could suppress it. Species that had been oppressed by the Empire for centuries began to whisper among themselves, if the mighty Draconians could be defeated by humans, maybe they were not as invincible as everyone believed. Dr. Alex Carter intercepted Draconian military communications and learned that panic was spreading through their officer corps. Many commanders were requesting transfers away from the front lines. Some were even deserting their posts rather than face the human fleet in battle. Commander Ben Hayes received reports from his intelligence network throughout Draconian space. Rebel groups on conquered worlds were beginning to organize and prepare for uprisings. The empire that had been held together by fear and superior firepower was starting to crack under pressure. Admiral Morrison knew that the war was entering a critical phase. His small fleet had done more damage to the Draconian Empire than anyone had thought possible. But eventually Zargoth would corner them and force a major battle. When that happened, the humans would need to prove that they could win against overwhelming odds. The hunt through the galaxy continued as human ships struck at targets throughout Draconian space. Every attack weakened the Empire and strengthened the growing belief that they could be defeated. The species that had ruled through terror for a millennium was learning what it felt like to be afraid. Fleet Admiral Zargoth stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical display with growing satisfaction. After weeks of chasing the elusive human fleet across the galaxy, he had finally cornered them at the nexus point. The gravitational anomaly created natural hyperspace corridors that both sides needed to control, and now the humans were trapped with nowhere to run. The nexus point was a swirling mass of twisted space-time that looked like a giant whirlpool made of stars. Ancient alien technology had created the anomaly millions of years ago, and no one knew exactly how it worked. Ships could use the gravitational currents to travel faster than normal hyperspace, but the area was also dangerous and unpredictable. Zargoth had brought his entire fleet of 800 warships to this battle. He was certain that the humans could not escape this time, because the anomaly blocked most fold space jumps. The human fleet would have to fight or surrender, and Draconians never accepted surrender. From species that had humiliated their empire, Captain Tony Rodriguez commanded the UTS Retribution, and he knew that his ship was acting as bait for the biggest trap in human history. His orders were to appear damaged and vulnerable, while leading the entire Draconian fleet deeper into the anomaly field. It was a dangerous job that required nerves of steel and perfect timing. Rodriguez had ordered his crew to vent atmosphere from several sections of his ship to make it look like they had suffered battle damage. Emergency lights flashed on his bridge and fake distress signals broadcast on all frequencies. To any Draconian scanner, the UTS Retribution looked like a crippled ship trying desperately to escape. "Sir, the Draconian fleet is taking the bait," reported Lieutenant Gary Mills from the sensor station. "They are moving in fast formation directly toward us. Admiral Zargoth seems to think we are helpless." Rodriguez smiled grimly as he watched hundreds of enemy ships closing in on his position. The Draconians were so eager to finally catch the human fleet that they were not being careful about their approach. They had committed their entire force to this attack without checking for hidden dangers. What Zargoth did not know was that Dr. Alex Carter had spent months studying the nexus point and learning how to weaponize the gravitational anomaly itself. Hidden throughout the twisted space were quantum mines that could destabilize the fabric of reality in the region. The mines were invisible to normal sensors, and they had been placed with surgical precision. Commander Kate Phillips had led the dangerous mission to plant the mines 2 weeks earlier. Her stealth ship UTS Phantom had made dozens of trips into the anomaly field, dodging gravitational currents that could crush a normal vessel. Each mine had to be positioned exactly right, or the trap would not work properly. Admiral Morrison watched the battle develop from his command ship positioned outside the anomaly field. He could see the entire Draconian fleet moving into the trap like pieces on a chessboard. Everything depended on perfect timing and the courage of Captain Rodriguez and his crew. "All ships prepare for final phase," Morrison transmitted to his scattered fleet. "When the mines detonate, we move in fast and hit them while they are confused. This is our chance to break their main fleet and end their ability to threaten human space." The Draconian fleet entered the deepest part of the anomaly field in pursuit of the apparently helpless human ship. Zargoth was so focused on his prey that he ignored the strange sensor readings his officers reported. He believed that the gravitational distortions were just natural effects of the nexus point. Captain Rodriguez waited until the last possible moment before giving the signal. His ship was surrounded by hundreds of enemy vessels, and their weapons were charging for the killing blow. "All units, spring the trap now," he transmitted on a coded frequency that only human ships could receive. Dr. Carter triggered the quantum mines from his position aboard the UTS Defiance. The mines detonated simultaneously throughout the anomaly field, creating cascading gravitational waves that tore through space like invisible tsunamis. The careful balance of forces that kept the nexus point stable suddenly became chaotic and unpredictable. Draconian ships that were designed for overwhelming firepower rather than maneuverability found themselves caught in gravitational currents they could not escape. The massive vessels were built like fortresses that could survive almost any attack, but they were not built to handle rapidly changing gravitational fields. Smaller human ships with their advanced engines and adaptive technology could ride the gravitational waves like surfers on an ocean. The same forces that trapped the Draconian fleet allowed the human ships to move faster and strike from unexpected angles. The battle that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Space itself had become a weapon that the humans could control. Draconian ships found their weapons missing targets as gravitational lenses bent their energy beams in impossible directions. Their formations broke apart as some ships were accelerated forward while others were held back by invisible forces. Colonel Frank Davis led marine assault teams that boarded crippled Draconian vessels throughout the battle zone. The humans had learned that capturing enemy technology was just as important as destroying enemy ships. Every computer core they seized contained valuable intelligence about Draconian military capabilities and strategic plans. But the trap came with a terrible cost for the human fleet as well. The gravitational distortions were powerful enough to affect human ships too, and several vessels were caught in the same forces that destroyed their enemies. Captain Rodriguez watched in horror as the UTS Vengeance was torn apart by conflicting gravitational fields. "We have to get our people out of there," Rodriguez called over the radio as he saw human ships in trouble. But the gravitational chaos made rescue operations almost impossible. Ships that tried to help their allies risked being destroyed themselves. The worst moment came when Rodriguez realized that his own ship was trapped in a gravitational eddy that was pulling it toward the center of the anomaly. The UTS Retribution had served as bait for too long, and now the trap was closing on the hunters as well as the prey. "All crew to escape pods," Rodriguez ordered as his ship began to break apart under the gravitational stress. "Send our navigation data to Admiral Morrison and tell him the mission was successful. The Draconian fleet is finished." As the UTS Retribution died in the swirling chaos of the Nexus Point, its sacrifice allowed the rest of the human fleet to escape and claim victory. When the gravitational storms finally calmed down, over 300 Draconian ships had been destroyed or captured, including Zargoth's mighty flagship. The Emperor's invincible fleet had been shattered by a force 1/5 its size, and the galaxy would never again believe that the Draconian Empire could not be defeated. The trap at Nexus Point had cost both sides dearly, but it marked the beginning of the end for 1,000 years of Draconian dominance. Emperor Korthnak stood in his throne room staring at holographic displays that showed the complete destruction of his mighty fleet. 3/4 of his navy had been wiped out in a single battle at the Nexus Point. The report seemed impossible to believe, but they kept coming from every corner of his crumbling empire. The Emperor's golden throne room had been built to intimidate visitors with its massive size and displays of conquered worlds. Now those same displays showed rebellion spreading like wildfire through the outer systems. Species that had been oppressed by the Draconians for centuries were rising up and declaring their independence. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UTS Defiance and watched his fleet grow larger every day. Ships from dozens of liberated worlds were joining the human fleet as it moved toward the Draconian home system. Each species brought their own vessels, their own weapons, and their own burning hatred for their former oppressors. The coalition fleet now numbered over 600 ships from 40 different species. Humans had provided the spark that lit the fire of rebellion, but now the entire galaxy was united against Draconian tyranny. Morrison knew that this was no longer just a human war for survival. It had become a galactic war for freedom. Captain Lisa Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral after her heroic actions throughout the campaign. She now commanded a mixed squadron of human, alien, and captured Draconian vessels, the site of former Draconian warships fighting against their own empire. Sent a powerful message to anyone who still believed the Emperor was invincible. Dr. Alex Carter worked around the clock in his laboratory aboard the flagship, preparing his final surprise for the Draconians. Using technology captured from dozens of enemy ships, he had developed a computer virus that could shut down the biological components that controlled Draconian vessels. Their own arrogance in creating ships that only they could operate would become their ultimate weakness. "The virus is ready, Admiral," Carter reported to Morrison with exhaustion in his voice. "We can transmit it directly to any Draconian ship within communication range. Their ships will lose power and life support within minutes." They built their technology to exclude other species, and now that exclusion will destroy them. The virus represented everything that made humans dangerous to the established order of the galaxy. While other species had accepted their limitations, humans had always found ways to turn disadvantages into advantages. They had taken draconian exclusivity and weaponized it against them. Commander Ben Hayes led reconnaissance missions to gather intelligence on the final draconian defenses around their home world. His stealth ships reported that the Emperor had recalled every remaining vessel to protect his capital planet. Over 200 ships surrounded Draconis Prime in defensive formations that had never been broken. But Hayes also reported something more important than military intelligence. Draconian civilians were fleeing the capital world in massive numbers. The Emperor's own people no longer believed he could protect them from the human-led coalition. The foundation of fear that held the Empire together was cracking. As the coalition fleet approached the draconian home system, Morrison received a transmission from Emperor Korthnax himself. The alien ruler appeared on the main screen of the UTS Defiance, his reptilian features twisted with rage and desperation. "Human Admiral," the Emperor hissed through his translator. "You have destroyed an empire that stood for 1,000 years. What do you hope to gain from this madness? Your species is still weak and primitive compared to the Draconians. We can rebuild our fleets and crush you eventually." Morrison looked at the Emperor with cold determination. "Your Majesty, we learned everything we needed to know about your empire 15 years ago when you attacked our world. You taught us that might makes right and that the strong can do whatever they want to the weak. We have simply become stronger than you." The final battle above Draconis Prime was not the massive space engagement that the Emperor expected. As the Draconian fleet prepared for a desperate last stand, Dr. Carter activated his virus and transmitted it to every enemy ship simultaneously. One by one, the mighty vessels of the Empire went dark and powerless. Draconian crews watched in horror as their own ships betrayed them. Life support systems failed, weapons powered down, and engines stopped working. The biological technology that had given them superiority over other species now left them helpless as their ships drifted like dead metal in space. Admiral Rodriguez led the boarding parties that captured the disabled Draconian vessels. Her Marines found enemy crews hiding in emergency shelters, completely cut off from their ship systems. The proud warriors who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were now prisoners in their own vessels. Commander Hayes led the assault on the Imperial Palace while Emperor Korthnax made his final stand. The palace had been built to be impregnable with shields and weapons that could hold off an entire fleet. But the human forces had learned to think differently about every problem they faced. Instead of attacking the palace directly, Hayes used captured Draconian shuttles to land his troops inside the shield perimeter. The Emperor's own transportation systems carried the forces that would end his reign. By the time the palace guards realized what was happening, human soldiers were already inside the building. Emperor Korthnax faced a choice between death and surrender. The proud ruler who had never known defeat chose to flee, rather than face justice for centuries of oppression. His escape pod launched from a hidden bay just minutes before Hayes reached the throne room. Admiral Morrison stood where the Emperor's throne had been, but he was not claiming dominion over the galaxy. Humanity had fought not for conquest but for freedom, their own and that of every species the Draconians had oppressed. The humans had proved that no empire was truly invincible. Dr. Carter worked with scientists from dozens of species to share human technology freely throughout the galaxy. The knowledge that had won the war would be used to build a better future for everyone. No single species would ever again have the power to dominate all others. The news of the Emperor's defeat spread faster than his fleeing ships could carry him. On thousands of worlds throughout the galaxy, oppressed peoples celebrated their liberation. The empire that had ruled through fear and superior firepower had collapsed in a matter of months. Morrison addressed the galaxy from the ruins of the Imperial Palace. Today marks the end of an empire built on conquest, and the beginning of a new age built on cooperation. Humanity fought not to replace one tyrant with another, but to ensure that freedom belongs to everyone. The human fleet returned to Earth as heroes, but their real victory was philosophical. They had shown the galaxy that innovation and determination could overcome any advantage. The small blue world that had been dismissed as insignificant had changed the course of galactic history forever.